We met on a dating app. He was married and his profile read like a confession. I love my wife, he wrote. I don't want to cheat, at least I think I don't, but I do want to talk. I should have been mortified, but I was intrigued because I'm nosy. And there was this raw honesty in his profile that really hooked my attention. I wanted to know why he was looking, but not really looking. I was curious about this border that he had drawn for himself. I mean, what could he talk about with a stranger that he couldn't talk about with the woman he laid his head down with every night? I wanted to know his story, or at least the version he was willing to share with a complete stranger. Hey lovers, this is Sex in Real Life. Honest conversations about sex and relationships beyond 40. I'm your host, Stacey Herrera. After exchanging a few messages, we decided that talking on the phone would be better. I mean, I don't know about you, but I feel like voices carry weight that text can't. Like, you can hear hesitation in someone's voice. You can hear a smile when they are saying something that excites them. And also, I like to feel how someone's voice lands in my body. At the time, he was away on business and staying in a hotel room in a city that wasn't his. And I had a Google Voice number, so it provided a layer of safety. So we could, both be two anonymous ghosts in the machine. I was lying on the floor of my closet when he called. I always lie on the floor of my closet. It's like cool. Also, I do a lot of things in my closet. Anyway, I digress. I was laying on the floor of the closet when he called, and we talked for 6 hours. The conversation, it didn't start off like heavy. He wasn't like sharing all his secrets right up front. At first, it was just kind of surface. We laughed, and there were a few things, tender things, and a whole lot of really bad dad jokes because sometimes men use those as a defense mechanism when they're nervous, but I digress. The hours seemed to fly by. He told me about his wife, like not like intimate things, at least not stuff that he shouldn't have been sharing, but like he told me that he still remembered the way that the light hit her eyes when she was walking toward him down the aisle. I mean, that is not how a man who's fallen out of love speaks of their wife, He got choked up when he was describing the day his daughter was born. He described this, terrifying electric shift of becoming a dad. And in his words, it was love at first sight. And when he told me that, like, his voice was like so thick with emotion. And more than once that night, he said, I've never told anyone that before. He talked about his father who died when he was only 5. And that loss really did create the architecture of his life in a lot of ways. And even all these years later, he still wondered, what his father would think about the world or the political climate. He wondered what his dad would feel about technology and all the advancements that have happened in his lifetime. He wondered what his father would think about the man he became. His mother remarried when he was a kid, but he didn't think she was happy. And he never asked her, though, and he felt like it wasn't his place. And even now, he still had never asked. He had outgrown his career more than a decade before this conversation. He was an accountant, and he said he was really good with numbers, but he described it like a cage. In his mind, there was this parallel universe where he didn't sit behind a desk. And in that world, he built homes with his hands. He described feeling the grain of wood and the weight of a hammer. And he said that being good at math felt like a curse that trapped him in a life that he really didn't want. And then he said, I've never told anyone that before. By the end of that call, 6 hours later, the sun was starting to come up where he was. And the last thing I said to him was, you really do love your wife. That was the truest thing I could say, because everything about the way he spoke of her and their life pointed to that. He did not want to replace his wife. He just didn't feel seen by her, you know? And I don't think he knew that. He thought that he was on a dating app because he wanted sex. That's the only way he knew how to fill that void. But what he really wanted, he wanted someone to be curious about him. He wanted to be asked questions that he didn't know that he needed to be asked. He wanted to share his inner life with somebody. I mean, and his outer life was full. I mean, he had a wife and a daughter and a career and a house. But he had never talked about the father he lost at 5 or the wooden houses that he builds in his dreams. He was like carrying all this longing and all this grief all by himself. And I'm sure that the people around him love him very much, but for whatever reason, the conditions for him to share never happened. But then one night, while he's in a hotel room in another state, he calls a stranger on a Google Voice number and spills the beans. That's intimacy. That was what he was hungry for. He knew he wanted to talk, and that was like, radical when you really think about it. In my opinion, I think that intimacy is really a sense of feeling deeply known and still accepted. Like telling someone the worst parts of yourself and not having them shirk away. I think it's emotional proximity that allows you to drop the facade. It's so much bigger than physical stuff. It's like saying, I really want you to see me. I'm willing to let you see me. And I hope you let me see you too. Sometimes intimacy is just two people lying in the dark talking about the stuff that gets on their nerves. Maybe the fear of aging or, the looming reality of death or the humiliation of losing your shit at work. It doesn't require sex. Sometimes it doesn't require touching. Sometimes you don't even have to be in the same room at all. It just needs to have presence. Like, you just need to be present enough to witness someone else's reality. Sometimes sex can be a gateway to this kind of connection. I mean, our bodies speak a language that our words sometimes can't find. And, there's something about the vulnerability of being physically naked that sometimes allows you to be emotionally naked. And sometimes we're super afraid of being emotionally naked. But when you don't have clothes on and you don't have pockets, there's something about that sometimes allows you to reveal. And when it works, your system gets flooded with oxytocin and you feel safe, at least for a little while. But, of course, there's a but. That can sometimes be a trap because sometimes that feeling of safety is just the hormonal flood. And hormones crash. So all that everything is good feeling can plummet really quickly. So if you are reaching for sex as a substitute for conversations that you are too afraid to start, the crash is hard. Because if chemistry is the only thing that's holding the connection together, when the smoke clears, you're just two people in a room again. And that can sometimes feel lonelier than it did before you had sex in the first place. Hollow sex is a signal. It's data. I think everything is data. It's like if you feel hollow after sex, that's really your body's way of telling you that you fed the wrong hunger. And I have talked to so many people over the years who strayed from their relationship or came close to straying, and their stories are remarkably similar. So often they think that they're looking for sex. They're looking for, a spark or some kind of adventure, but most of the time they're just reaching for someone to see them, someone that doesn't have a fixed idea of who they are. When you have been with someone for a long time, for decades, you develop shorthand. You think you know all their stories. You think you know what they're going to say about whatever's going on. You can't see them with fresh eyes. But a stranger is curious and asks questions and then waits for the answer because they already know that they don't know. But there's something about that feeling of being discovered that is so intoxicating. And so we often mistake that feeling for this is the right person, or this is proof that what I have at home is insufficient. But most of the time, most of the time, it's really just a lack of familiarity that creates space for you to be seen. But we often use it as proof that the current relationship is no longer viable, right? And as we get older, we start peeling back layers that we don't even know are there. We change, and the things that mattered at 25 feel trivial at 50. We have more to say, more to process, and sometimes we need a witness. And, the act of speaking is like discovery. We find out what we think by hearing ourselves say it to someone who's actually listening. So, the guy on the phone, he wasn't just being seen by me, he was seeing himself. And, by saying some of those things out loud for the first time, I think he was meeting the guy who wanted to build those houses. He was getting to know that 5-year-old boy who still misses his dad. Genuine curiosity allows you to know yourself. And when relationships no longer have room for that, when the curiosity dries up, we start looking for it in the shadows. We call it an affair or midlife crisis or falling out of love or whatever, but mostly we're just searching for a mirror. There's that saying, familiarity breeds contempt, like familiarity is the enemy of intimacy, but we can change that. We can swap certainty for curiosity anytime. Curiosity is, just the desire to know someone's inner world as it exists right now, not as it was 10 years ago. Practice asking and listening and discovering, rather than just assuming. The most fulfilled couples are the ones who remain curious about each other. If I hear one more person describe their quote unquote loving relationship as we can finish each other's sentence, oh my God. We say that like it's the ultimate sign of deep connection, but in my opinion, I think that's a red flag. Like finishing someone's sentence means you're not listening, you're anticipating. You're interpreting what what should be intrigue, When someone's talking to you, they don't need you to be the narrator. They just want you to listen. They want you to be a witness. And certainty, in my opinion, certainty is where intimacy goes to die. Here's a way to look at this. The person that you live with is a stranger that you have not met today. Like when they walked out the door this morning, they came back as someone else because every interaction, stress or thoughts that they had during the commute or whatever, it changed them in some small way. So there's no such thing as staying the same. Intimacy is always possible, but only if you are willing to look closely enough to see the shifts. Curiosity is like scaffolding. Without it, the structure of the relationship, it might stand. The bills might be paid. If you've got kids, the kids aren't hungry, but the house might get shallow, because you're just moving through the same space, sleeping in the same bed, and missing each other entirely. Curiosity is a muscle that you build, and you can decide to be curious today, right now. You can ask a question that's been holding you back. You can listen, without interpreting. You can let your partner surprise you. I mean, they are surprising. You just stopped expecting them to be. Anyway, that guy never called again after that night. I don't know if he went home and looked at his wife with new eyes, and I'm not sure if he tried to close the gap or if he just went back to the accounting of his life. I don't know. I just know that day we only had those 6 hours. But I think about him sometimes. I mean, how could you not think about a man in a hotel room who logged into a dating app because he wanted to be in his own life again? He missed the version of himself that was interesting. He missed feeling like he was someone who was worth knowing, and he needed a witness, and I happened to be free. What he was longing for wasn't actually gone, it was just unfound. It was still sitting there, buried under years of routine and the certainty of a long marriage. But intimacy doesn't just disappear. We just stop looking and asking and staying on the line. If anything I said today stirred something in you, a memory of someone you love or a part of yourself you've tucked away, pass it along. Text the link to the person you've been meaning to really talk to. It's a simple way to start a conversation that you might have been avoiding. And if you want to help others find this space, a rating or a short review really makes a difference. It helps these stories reach people who are sitting in a hotel room or on the closet floor right now, wondering why they feel alone. Next week, we're going to be asking a harder question. Do you really want the kind of honesty you claim to value? Or do you just want to be told what you want to hear? We're going there. I'll see you then. Ciao.